Welcome to The Unconventional Investor, where strategy, mindset, and money come together to build lasting wealth beyond the numbers. I'm your host, Michelle Moses. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. I had a great time talking with Tessa about charitable giving, and we went on so long that we are going to split this up into two parts. So this is the first part, and then be sure to tune in a couple weeks, and we will release the second part. And thank you so much for listening. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I have a special guest, one of my longtime friends, Tessa Wardzinski. And I am very excited to talk about this because we are going to be talking about charitable giving and the ways that you can bring it into your life, making it fun and easy and kind of building a generosity habit. And the reason that I wanted to do this episode is because, as we all know, a lot of the programs that have supported some of I'll say our most vulnerable people have been cut. And so I wanted to do an episode of the ways that we can start to think about giving and nonprofits and all of that as just a normal part of our everyday life. And to talk about this, I have Tessa Wardzinski here to talk, and she is a fundraising consultant who's worked with organizations like the UN, UNAIDS, UNICEF, and the Make-A-Wish Foundation. She specializes in international marketing management, particularly in digital marketing. So thank you, Tessa, for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. Love talking about this stuff.
I know you do. We have talked about it. And full disclosure, you guys, Tessa and I have been friends for probably about 20 years. And I had no idea what she did for most of that time. Two, I was just like, brainstorming episodes of things that I wanted to do with my little AI agent. And it said, if you could find someone that specialized in digital marketing for fundraising. And I was like, oh my God, that is exactly my friend Tessa. And so I called her and here we are. So yeah. So I just think it's hilarious that for so many years I didn't know what you did. And now you're like the perfect fit for what I wanted to do.
But to be fair, I was out of the country for part of that time, right?
Yeah, so. You were. I know. Like Tessa worked for the UN and for UNICEF and was like living in Europe and living all over the place. And so we'll get into some of the things that she learned because it's very interesting to hear about how people give around the world. So we'll kind of talk about that. But so to kind of get into this, I want to list off some of the types of organizations that have lost funding within the last year. And so this is specifically so that I'm hoping that we can, start to try to include them. So the list includes food banks, homeless shelters, mental health clinics, job training programs, disaster relief groups, emergency shelter providers, and international aid organizations. So a lot of these organizations, it was their primary funding. What was it not, or is it mostly their primary funding, or is it just like a steady funding for them?
It depends on the organization. For some organizations, it was the majority of their funding. Others, it was a minor part. And then I think probably for the majority, because, I don't know every organization, obviously, but for the majority, it was a mix. It was a steady stream of income that they could use for specific programs, and then individual giving and other kind of institutional giving like foundations, private giving essentially made up the rest.
Okay, so a lot of times the organizations, they do have a mix, essentially.
Yes,
so
yeah.
The government
In fact,
funding
you should.
was just a portion of that.
Yeah, you should have a mix. Just for the health of the organization, there should be a mix of your funding sources because you never know what's going to dry up when, to be frank.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start off and talk about the need. Like, why do we even need these organizations, and what is... we were talking before the podcast, and it was like we were talking about investing in these organizations. And so what do we get back from it?
Okay, so I'm going to go outside of the good feeling we get when we give, because I think most people are in touch with that. When you give a gift to somebody, when you give a donation, you feel good, right? It makes you feel good. So I'm going to go outside of that and just look at the practical reasons for giving. Once again, outside of the humanitarian aspect, even of just supporting our fellow human beings, in order to keep yourself, your people, your family, your people, your friends and family, and your stuff that you've accumulated safe, we make sure that other people have enough. That's essentially it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a very practical and maybe a little bit ruthless way of looking at it. I understand, but it is life. This is how life works. Okay.
Yeah, but it's human
Well,
nature. I mean, that's just human nature because humans are so smart, like they'll find a way to try to get the other things. Rather, yeah, I get what you're saying. That where if it's more
yes.
equal, then everyone's not fighting over the same resources.
Right, right. And we're talking basics. Yeah. I don't mean like everybody can go on a vacation for 2 weeks a year to France or something. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, but we're just talking
yeah,
about food or yeah.
yeah. Food, clothing, shelter, the basics, some basic healthcare access, things like that. And this, by making sure, we as private citizens, by making sure that we are supplementing the services and or income that these people need, we can create a society that we enjoy living in as well. Just thinking about like in Phoenix where we live, the unhoused situation has been for many, many years, large. That's the best way we
Yes.
can put it, right? This is
Yeah,
not
like
a
if
new
you
thing
guys are
for
not
us.
from Phoenix, we have a very large unhoused population. And I
Yeah.
noticed because I moved away for a while and then 6 years ago I moved back. And I couldn't believe how much it had changed in 3 years. Like it had exploded. Like it was a
Yeah.
noticeable difference when I was driving down the street. And I
Yeah.
often say, I'm like, please take my money. I don't want to see these people doing drugs on the side of the road anymore. I don't want to see them suffering. I
Yeah.
don't want to see, it's 115 out. I don't want to
Yeah.
see them suffering and, so tan and all of that. And so I would like, that would benefit me just in my everyday life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of what we have to think about too, is that like, and you have to think too, not everybody has a family. Like there's so many people out there that have no their parents died, they have no brothers and sisters, and
Right.
maybe their grandparent is really old, or you just never know what their situation is. And if you literally have no one, because I think about my life and how many risks I've taken, but I've always had my parents' house to move back into. And if
Right.
you don't have
Same.
that, yeah, then you're so worried about like, I have to make rent on this apartment or whatever it is that you have. You
Yeah.
can't take
Yeah.
risks because you have nothing to fall back on.
Absolutely. And that thinking also extends internationally. It's much easier to talk about it domestically because we see it with our own eyes, right? But internationally, same thing. When people are desperate, they do desperate things.
Hmm.
And they get involved with organizations that are frankly evil sometimes because those people are feeding them,
Hmm. Hmm.
or, just general inability to move upward at all. And we're talking about abject poverty in a lot of places. So I think it's difficult for people in developed countries to understand what we mean when we talk about abject poverty. But there are countries in this world where the people eat only every second day. So
And they have, yeah, and
serious
they don't
stuff.
have the support programs that we have
There's
or
nothing.
had. I don't
Yeah.
even know what's left in place, but I've
Yeah.
always been thankful that we had these programs because I don't want to see like huge amounts of poverty. I just don't think that we need to see it, and it's really
Yeah.
hard to see children in that, and it's hard to see
Mhm.
people without clean drinking water, all of those types of things because it seems so easy for us. And yeah, and so I think what has happened is that our government was taking care of a lot of this. And now if we want our world to look different, we have got to participate in building it. And I think that right or wrong or however you're feeling about what's going on in the world, I just
Mhm.
think that be the change that you want to see in the world. And so if you do not want to see people without health care, then I'm really urging you to give in that way.
Yeah.
And I'll do another podcast about ways of giving, like with your IRAs and stuff like that. But we're going to talk about ways to make it automatic and fun because Tessa has a background in international marketing. And so can you explain like some of the stuff that you were helping people do around the world?
So basically, it was my job for quite a few years to uh, make the most efficient ways of giving, particularly in digital. Yeah. I worked with some other things like major giving too, but particularly with digital, it was to make it as efficient as possible, make the usability perfect, and or as close to perfection, just always chasing it, always testing, because when a person comes to your website, via whatever vehicle, whether it be through social media or your email or Google search or whatever, we want them to be able to give you money quickly. You'd never want to be a barrier to giving. And it was basically my job to make sure that we got people to your site to give. And then we made it easy for you to give after that. And I did it for countries all over the place. And it was very interesting. Uh, you know, I think one of the things that I learned by working with so many different countries is that people have the same reasons for giving. This does not change.
So humans are humans around the world.
They are. They give to people. People give to other people. So when you communicate and you want them to give to your organization, specifically, the storytelling aspect is what needs to be there. And the storytelling isn't just what gets them there, but what keeps them there so that they continue to give to you. And that was very similar all over the world. You might get a little bit different style here or there. Like in France, for example, things were written a little bit more formally than perhaps in Australia, where everything was real cheeky and fun. And it was just very different, but same idea, right? We're talking the same stories about the same kids that you want to help. It's just a slightly different way of talking about it. It might be more visual too.
Well, how did you help people, though, that didn't speak English? Did you just have a translator, or did mostly people spoke English and then they would translate it into their language on their website?
Yeah. So first of all the offices you work with, they're all required to speak English. You have to have a certain level of proficiency to even work there. So that was easy. I could, converse with people. I know a bit of Spanish, so I could work with the Spanish speaking offices a little bit easier than the other ones, because occasionally I could figure out in Spanish how to say it, so they might get the concept better. But everybody was quite proficient in English, so that wasn't hard. Additionally, that would mean that, like, if I was creating marketing materials, I could do them all in English and they would just translate them. Yeah. Okay. And with their experience, like, what I would try and do, what gets hard, I have to be honest with you, what gets hard is when you're trying to translate a feeling. And because words don't always translate.
That's what I mean, because every language has like these weird sayings.
Yes.
It's like my son was asking the other day, what does rolling over in your grave mean? And I was like, gosh, I've never thought, like you just accept some of these things that you say. And so every language has all these weird things that, sayings that they say. And so that's what I mean, like, because you can't translate that to another, but then they would kind of translate it. And so you were working with other professionals, but you were kind of the expert on how to get giving, on their site and get people to give faster, essentially.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, faster, without any issues, and to give immediately, like you wanted them to give at that point. And you just avoid colloquialisms, and you speak in real simple language. Avoiding colloquialisms, I did not find hard at all. I generally don't speak that way anyway, because my mother was from another country. So, I already learned not to do that, but and, I had so many relatives in another country. It was pointless. I can't speak that way, But speaking simply actually turned out to be a little bit difficult for me. Your level, if you have a relatively high grasp of the English language, you start to speak with words that, and write with words that aren't great to be translated, And I don't mean, and it depended on the language, right? Like with Indo-European languages, that didn't matter because a lot of those languages also have high amounts of Latin and Greek. So it translates, but if you're dealing with Asian languages, they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if it was like some sort of Russian type language, with the different alphabet. And so, but I guess the core of it is the same because humans are humans and they give for the same, right? So that's why you can do this on a worldly is because the motivation is the same is because people want to help.
Absolutely. And that was my job is, how do you get across that motivation? And so I wouldn't just send you a package, I'd have like a short, like discussion like you and I are having right now about it to try and get to you the feeling that I want you to translate rather than just direct translation. And, it took some training, but they got very good at it very quickly. This did not take long. And there were some countries where they were just as good at it as I was. Korea in particular was just a powerhouse, South Korea. So yeah, the kind of assistance they needed just depended on where they were in terms of digital marketing.
Okay. And so do you think that when it comes about to like just the listeners here and they're trying, I think that we can all identify the things that we kind of have like a soft spot for, right? Because I think that what happens with me is mine is always animals and kids and the environment. But there's so many organizations out there that I end up doing like $25, $30 here, $40 there, like all over the place. And I just don't know if like that's better or worse than just compiling it all and giving it to, one or two different organizations. But then I feel like everybody else is missing out because then there's all these tiny organizations.
Yeah.
And so I always feel guilty in that way because it's like I want to give to all of them, but then I just give a little bit and I don't know if it would be better to just give like a larger amount.
So I think for very small organizations, like animal rescues, your local animal rescue, things like that, even the tiny amounts make a difference. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about organizations that have really small budgets. So for them, $25 is great. The larger, more well-known organizations, the bigger gift makes more of a difference just because the volume is there. For the amount of people giving is high, so it doesn't hit as much of the mark unless, of course, you're doing monthly giving, and I can get into that a little bit later. But so I think if you're trying to parse out let's say you have a particular budget for charitable giving, and you're trying to parse it out, that might be a way to think of it is how small is this organization? Because if it is, then the $25 will actually make a difference to them.
Okay.
A larger one, maybe you're like, okay, that one's more like 100. Or we knew people that when you learn giving, you start to see people that give every other year. Yeah. And we knew what they were doing. They're giving to one organization one year and another organization the next year. And they would go back and forth. And they probably had like 4 of these that they were doing this with, and they would cycle them. Yeah.
Okay.
And those are the people that would give like a few thousand each time. This is not $25 gifts and stuff, but this is not an uncommon giving pattern. And it's because they want to help everybody, but everybody has a budget, so this is an understandable feeling. And I think that's the only way you can kind of parse it out, Michelle, is to just go, okay, how small is the budget, or how big is the budget? Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes me feel better. So that some of it, because it is, it's a lot of times I need hay for my animals, and I'm like, okay, here's $25 or here's $40 or whatever I'm, might have that month.
Well, I do the same thing with GoFundMe. Like I gave the other day to some lady that needed to fix her car. I have no idea who this woman is. She's out in the middle of Kentucky, in rural Kentucky, and it wasn't even that much to fix her car, but she didn't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot either, but I gave her $25. I'm like, hey, that'll help.
Try to help her out a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, that makes me feel better. So, and do you think that most people have a budget for giving, or is it kind of like 50-50, kind of all over the place that people just give when they're feeling it?
It really depends on the type of giver we're talking about. I think that wealthier people definitely know about how much they're going to give every year. The difference you'll see at the end of the year where it comes out that, oh, wait, I need to give more because the accountant called,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why December 31st is the biggest day of the year in the United States for giving.
Is it?
Online? Oh, by far. Yeah.
Okay.
I had like $1 million day one year. Yeah. Because people are like, oh, wait, I need to give to make sure and take it off this tax year,
Right.
Because what happens is, of course, your investments, sometimes, they go up and down a little bit, right? So you may have been expecting to make 10% on something and you made 12. There's extra money you can give there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just from tax purposes, people to think that way. But I do think middle class people and, people that don't have, quite a bit of money, I don't think they have budgets. I think that they, like you, are like, hey, this person needs help, or this organization needs help, or we need to do this and we need to do that. And then at the end of the year, they're like, oh, okay, I've got enough to take off my taxes if I itemize, or I don't have to because now you can do up to $1,000, without itemizing, like that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not have the impression, I'll put it that way,
That everybody
from my years
has
of
a
doing
budget
this.
like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I
There's
do.
wealthier people have budgets.
Yeah, so I do have a monthly budget, but now that there's been all the cuts, I've started to think about doing a certain percentage because I get paid kind of all over the place. Like it changes every single quarter. And so I've really been toying with doing more of a percentage of every quarter rather than the set amount that I had because I use a budgeting software.
Uh-huh.
And I love it. So I just have to share my story. So I have a budgeting software, and I love budgeting that amount. And then I don't have like the recurring that. So let's say it's $500. I don't remember how much it is. So let's say it's $500, and my recurring is like 250, which gives me 250 to be able to like support my friends, kids that are raising money for whatever, or all that kind of stuff, or the
Yeah.
random stuff that I see with the animal rescues. There's just all kinds of. They're even asking sometimes for $5. So I like that makes it fun. So it's like I have a budget for a certain amount every single month. And then part of it is recurring, but then part of it is just, whatever, wherever the wind takes me. And so as I was thinking about this episode, I'm like, like, what do I do and what makes it fun? And that's what makes it fun, honestly, is that I like that I can do the different ones because the ones that set, they like to set their budget, right? And so I like that I can be part of that, of helping them set their budget. But then I
Uh-huh.
also like that I can just go up the street to the farmer's market and there might be, whatever, some pet thing there that I can give some money to, and that might make their day. You never know.
Yes. Yeah. And in terms of budgeting, like as far as charities are concerned, it unless you're a person that's giving like mid to high figures and up, monthly giving is a great way to go. I'm just going to put in a plug for that. It really helps charities understand how much money they're going to have every year. And it's not the most common way of giving. Most common is the one-off gift, but it is in terms of being able to plan and understand how much money they're going to be able to put in each program. It's the most helpful.
Yeah, and
You know,
hire people. And like, I can't imagine having to run an organization like, there's horses help, right? So you're running this organization and you're taking care of the horses, and you got the kids coming out and you're planning all of this, you're organizing with the caregivers, and you're having to advertise and market. And then you have to spend 50% of your time raising money too. It's like how I feel about schools, because my kids go to a charter school. Like the teachers and everything, they can't just focus on teaching. They have to spend 25% of their time out trying to fundraise or teach people about the Arizona tax credit. And I feel so bad for them because it's like they spend so much time having to raise money. And while I think it's a good thing to not just have so much that you're wasting it, because I
right?
think,
Yep.
having to raise it, then you're more of a steward with it,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it takes away from like the teachers, it takes away from them just being able to teach.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's what you're
so,
paying them for too, the specialization, not
right.
fundraising. Yeah.
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 Yeah. You're not paying them for fundraising. And I think that's the same thing, right? Okay. So now you said that with the nonprofits, like that is not their specialty, is fundraising. They want to help people. And so then they're having to put on this other hat that isn't necessarily like right what they were trained to do.
Yeah, and there are a lot of us in the fundraising profession at this point, but that's because it had to be. That the money isn't just appearing. If charities are e- reputable charities, because occasionally you find some that are not, okay, but most charities are extraordinarily judicious with their money. Right. I cannot tell you the amount of tracking we would do on what we're spending our time on, because they want to make sure you're as efficient as possible. Absolutely. Yeah. We would do it a couple times a year. We would do things, where it was like, okay, how much did you spend time this week? Track how much time you spent answering emails, how much time you spent on, usability in my case, website usability, this, that. We'd have all these different, and you were tracking it. And because they want to see what you're spending your time on. And this
Mhm.
also gives them the capability to report on how the money is being used. So, like let's say 80% of it is going to programs. 20% of it is going to everything else,
Hmm.
administration, fundraising, except,
Hmm.
operations, whatever. Yeah.
Well, and can we
Um,
talk a little bit too? Because I know there's like all those rating sites, the
yeah.
charity rating sites.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of them, and I don't know this, so correct me, but I feel like a lot of them are just like, you want it all to go to the people and not to the organization itself. And I get that. I do not want the CEO making $3.5 million. Like
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
lot of fundraising to just pay the
Yes.
CEO.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I totally get that. But at the same time, I think what has happened is I've realized that people don't need just money. Like these foster kids, they need people. They need teachers. They need like people to care about them. You can't just like throw money at them and expect it to be okay. And so I have a hard time with some of these charity rating places that don't like change it for based upon, like because like if you're
Yeah.
giving counseling to kids, like of course it's going to go to almost all overhead because you have to pay all these people to work with the kids, right?
Yeah.
Versus
It's
like a food bank, it can go to the food and then you can get other people to volunteer.
Yeah. So what I encourage people to do is weigh what you're seeing, the numbers that you're seeing with the kind of organization it is. I say this because I worked for a charity that, the rating of like percentage to programs hovered around 78%. Sometimes we made it to like the low 80s, but generally it's around 78%. And you want, by the way, you should have it to be above 75. Okay. 75 and above is what you're shooting for, no matter the kind of organization. But the reason it was at 78, 80 is because there were no grants. This organization never could apply for any grants. It was not the kind that would get money from the government. It was not the kind that was getting money from institutions. So of course that number is always going to be lower than another organization that is getting grant money from the government every year or from specific institutions. So
Hmm.
I think that when you're looking at these things, what kind of organization is it? If it's the kind that gets government money, their percentage should be higher, right? It should be
Hmm.
like 90. But if it's something that never gets any government money, or any sort of institutional funding, 75 is pretty good then because they've got to raise money from everybody else, from the private
Right.
sector.
Yeah, it's 100% from foundations and people and all that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and it costs money to get money out of people. It does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and just to let you all know, I have never worked in an organization that wasn't obsessed with the ROI of whatever fundraising initiative we just launched.
Oh,
So
really?
it's not
Okay.
like we're like, oh, we'll just spend this money and
Hmm.
and hopefully it works. No, 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 no. There was massive modeling and all sorts of stuff going on, sophistication. Now, granted, it depends on what kind of organization you work at. I worked for some pretty big names.
Yeah, you worked
But
for
we
some really
had
big
but
ones. Yeah.
yeah, but we had to sit there and model it out. I had to do it forecasting and, we even our testing, like this is the first time we're ever doing this. We had to be able to reassure the person that I was getting the money from and, in the budget that it was going to at least hit 3-1, at least. And the expectation was that it would hit 10-1. That was like
Mhm.
you got to
10, you
make
mean
money
10
on
people,
this.
10 kids or
No, well, 10 times whatever you spent. Yeah.
Oh,
So, yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So if I spent
O-
if my budget was $100,000, you had to at
mhm.
least have done 300,000 in revenue, to
Mhm.
say, oh yes, this is worth doing again. This is worth scaling. This is worth.
Mhm.
But the expectation was that you go much higher than that. If you only hit 1-1, I mean, yay, you didn't waste money.
But you didn't
But
raise
it
anything. This is how I
it
feel about
wasn't.
these galas, but yeah, we can get into
Yeah,
that if you
yeah.
want. Yeah.
I have gala issues as well. Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
major gala issues. And please tune in next time for part 2 of my conversation with Tessa Wardzinski about charitable giving. Thank you for listening to the Unconventional Investor Podcast. I hope you feel more confident in how you can grow your wealth using the strategies I shared in this episode. If you're ready to take the next step in diversifying your portfolio outside the stock market with alternative investments, head to mefinancial.net/contact us to book a 15-minute consult call with me. Let's discuss how we can work together to achieve your financial goals. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode.